Hi everyone, welcome to APA session 3, and we will be going over citations and order of pages. I wanted to add headings, but I felt that would make the PowerPoint video too long. So I decided to add headings in the next one, which I will begin working on that tomorrow. As you write scholarly papers and present those papers, it will be important to cite researchers who influenced your work. You will be credited for the uniqueness of your work, and citation does not take away from that in the least. In fact, it's impressive to see the research that you have put forth. Appropriate levels of citation in papers help students avoid plagiarism. And I'll just say a word about plagiarism and self-plagiarism. Plagiarism occurs when an author presents words, ideas, or images as their own when they're actually not. Self-plagiarism is, well, an example of that would be a student who has presented previous work that the student did perhaps in another class and presents it as new work. A student is often welcome to incorporate their past work when they are working on something new, but that should always be done with approval from the instructor. It's always ideal when an author uses their own words, and yet the author may be largely pulling their ideas from what they have read in books or publications of any kind from other authors. And that is perfectly acceptable as long as they are citing. And these are examples of in-text citations. In the first example, it says Holden Lund, 1988, examined effects of a guided imagery intervention on surgical stress and wound healing in a group of 24 patients. And you will note that no quotation marks were used because the author is paraphrasing. And note that at the bottom example, if you paraphrase again in the same paragraph, you can omit the year. This is actually example 3 on top there of a indirect quote. And again, you'll note no quotation marks because the author is paraphrasing. In the example of a direct quote just below that, you'll note that it is in quotation marks, and I have a correction to make on something I told you in the last session, was that you would use what they call ellipses in the beginning, which these consist of 3 dots, basically 3 punctuation marks before the quotation marks. However, I found that in APA 7, that is not necessary. You would not do that unless the quote itself was set up that way. But you would do it, you would enter the 3 dots at the end to indicate that you've only used part of the quote, that you've omitted a line, or you've omitted a paragraph, or you've omitted some area of that quote. And so it would go at the end, not at the beginning. And then in the next example, you see that the entire quote is in quotation marks because it is a direct quote. And you might note, we'll talk about that in a moment, the authors, there are 3 or more authors. And we know that because they've used the et al. It duo Benai, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name right, duo Benai et al. And that indicates in APA that we have 3 or more authors for this in-text citation. Still talking about in-text citations at this point, citations that go in the body of your paper. As a comparison, and next session I will add a reference list, and you'll see that references are different in that sense. They're more full, a lot more information in those. So if you have, for instance, a indirect quote or a direct quote, either one, you, with one author, you would put the author's name, comma, the year. Now, if it is a direct quote, there is one other item that would be added, and that would be the page number or the paragraph. And I will provide an example of that next session. But it would be like, I would explain it by saying it would be, for instance, Shanor, comma, 2022, comma, P for page number, dot, and then you would put the page number in. Or if you were citing the paragraph, you would put para. It would be Channer, comma, 2022, comma, para, P-A-R-A-P, and then whatever paragraph it is. So that's the only difference here between, this looks like it must have been in a paraphrase, because there's no page number, just a general paraphrasing of that, of the idea that, or the what the author had said. So you, as the author, simply paraphrased it and then added your citation. So if you have 2 authors, you, as you can see, you put, for instance, James and Chime in the parentheses, comma, 2022. And again, it looks like it is a citation that was paraphrased. Now, I want to mention, and I will provide an example of this next session, if you have a situation where you've got the author's name outside of the parentheses, you would put, for instance, James and Chime, A-N-D, rather than that and sign. When they're in the parentheses, you put the and sign, but if they're out of the parentheses, you put and, the word and. So I will provide an example of that. Now, if you have 3 or more authors, you put the first author's name, and then you add et al, et, and then al, period, comma, and then the year. And then at the end, of course, in your reference, every author would be listed. If you have a group author with abbreviation, for the first in-text citation of that paper, you would, as I've given an example, for instance, put in Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. You can see I've got a parenthesis at the beginning, and then in brackets you would put the abbreviation MDHHS. Now, there is somewhat of a difference between parentheses and brackets, and so sometimes brackets are used. For instance, if you as the author added something to a quote to clarify something, it would go in brackets. And in this case, for instance, the abbreviation goes in brackets. And you'll see that as I will give examples and show you some examples of paragraphs and citations, different types. So brackets and then comma, the year, parenthesis, and then period. Now, after that, for any subsequent citations, you would go ahead and just use the abbreviation and the year. Now, if you have a group author without abbreviation, and I've used Chamberlain University as an example, it would be Chamberlain University, comma, 2022. So that is an example. And this shows order of pages in a paper. Not too much explanation is needed here. It's pretty clear. Title page, page 1, abstract, page 2 if you've got an abstract, then text, start on a new page. It always tells you for each of these, start on a new page, and then references, footnotes, so on. So it tells you how, per APA guidelines, everything is supposed to be arranged in your paper. To conclude, we have covered some citations and examples and the order of pages. Next session, I plan on going more into citations and covering headings. And I think that's it for now. Have a good day.